Welcome to Sharp or Square, presented by Hard Rock Bet. We are part of the Volume Podcast Network. This is the show that makes the square sharper and makes the wise guys pay attention. I am Chad Millman. I'm joined, as always, by my two BFFs, my two companions, my two compadres, my official co-host, and my good buddy, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon! And also, we'll say hello to Seth.
Chad, how we doing?
Dude, we're fucking great because we got best-selling author, two-time New York Times best-selling author, with a new book coming out in the fall, a compilation of stories called Beyond That Hill. Seth, I'm glad you're on the show, Seth Wickersham, because all we do on this show is have best-selling authors come on and talk about their books. The last two authors we've had on this show have both gone on to have best-selling books.
I think it's the launching pad. There's no other way to describe. There's no other way to think about it.
We continue to be the most literate sports betting podcast in America. Seth, Simon and I have been discussing all things NFL draft, and we will continue doing that today with you. Your book from the fall, American Kings, is a primer for anybody who wants to understand not just what makes a quarterback, but how quarterback became sort of the cultural touchstone that it is today, truly royalty in the United States, tracing back the history all the way to today. Quarterback will continue to be the most important position in all of sports as long as the NFL is in existence. And so for people who might have missed that show and still have a chance to go buy the book, explain to people just how important the quarterback position is and how it evolved into what it is today, so we can frame a little bit about why Fernando Mendoza going number one is more than just a guy who could save the Raiders.
Yeah, well, that book was so much more work than the collection that I have coming, Beyond That Hill. I feel like I should have just titled that one Cashing In Twice. But yeah, I mean, the quarterback position, as you know, it's fascinated me, really going back to when I was in high school. And, you and I would throw footballs in the ESPN magazine offices in New York, in between meetings. And, even then, it was important for us to each throw a good spiral. And
True.
It's just such a unique job across sports, and not just in America, but globally. Like during the course of the book, I was sitting with the Hall of Famer Steve Young, and I asked him, like, what are all the hats you have to wear as the starting quarterback for an NFL team? And he just started rattling them off, from field general to matinee idol to amateur psychologist to chief cheerleader, breathtaking asshole, spokesperson for a multi-billion-dollar organization, all of these things. And I think he got to 17 hats total, and none of them were, oh, by the way, throw the ball through windows that nobody else can see, much less take advantage of while people are diving at your knees. And so how quarterback became so celebrated and achieved such a lofty status in our culture, I thought was fascinating. And then there's also just the nuts and bolts of, what is it like to do it? What does it build within you? What does it destroy? And what do the people who do it at the highest level have to contend with for the rest of their life? Because it assumes such a big part of your persona and your identity. And so those are the things that I was getting at. And as I look at the quarterbacks that are entering this year's draft, I see a bunch of guys who I think in different ways have all embodied all of those characteristics and worn all of those hats in different ways than I think for a lot of drafts. Like, I think that usually for a lot of drafts, you have guys who kind of come onto the scene, and like Jaden Daniels, for instance, you know what I mean? Like, like takes over the season like a rocket, wins Heisman Trophy, and it's really kind of a really breathtakingly fast acclimation. I think that with Mendoza, it's similar in a lot of ways, but unique for him because of the path that he took there. And so I think that, like, of all the quarterbacks drafts that we've had for a while, I think that the top three names that we talk about for this year are kind of uniquely equipped to be successful in ways that I'm not sure we could say that for other classes.
Give me a little bit of background here on just Mendoza. Like, what is it that you see in the intangibles of that bucket list of 17 things, that list of 17 things that Steve Young is talking about? What is it that gets GMs most excited about Mendoza?
Well, really all he has to get is one GM excited.
Yeah, right.
And I think that guy's pretty excited. I think the thing that's most interesting to me about Mendoza is, I think from a basic standpoint, I love his size. Like, first of all, I think that, like, the size factor and the fact that he's a legit 6'4" is a big differentiator for him and a lot of guys, the top guys in this year's draft. I love that when he's throwing, if you look at some of his best throws, he's throwing with a lot of anticipation. And I think that, like, that's kind of one of those skill sets. His soon-to-be boss, Tom Brady, once we were talking about accuracy, and he said, the most overlooked aspect of accuracy is decisiveness. And I thought that was a fascinating answer. But basically he's saying, like, it's like that Top Gun line, if you think, you're dead. And I think that you can see Mendoza getting the ball out with anticipation. And so you can see that he's being decisive and playing with a lot of confidence. And then I think the final thing is just that, like, his football career wasn't supposed to go this way and easily could have ended. You know what I mean? He's taken an atypical path. And I think that when I look at Mendoza going to the Raiders of all teams and having Tom Brady on board, so much of what Tom Brady is so proud of to this day is the path that he took. The fact that it was a harder and more challenging path than a lot of guys. And within that, one of the things he's always talking about is how lucky he was to have no eyes on him as a rookie. Like, he could make mistakes and be under the radar, and the press didn't care. They didn't even really notice him. And the coaches barely noticed him. And, I think that he looks at guys like Peyton Manning and John Elway, Eli Manning to an extent, guys who were drafted first overall, came up with a ton of expectation and hype and managed to live up to that, because that's a unique challenge. And not every guy can do it. And so I was kind of thinking, like, what's the biographical intersection between Brady and Mendoza? Because drafting a quarterback first overall is like the opposite of Tom Brady's path. And I think that, like, that's where they cross, they intersect, is that, like, if they had not been so, mentally tough, so strong-willed, they probably would have had nice college careers and then gone on to the business world. But instead, especially Mendoza just did something epic and legendary, as Chad talks about all the time. And I think that's probably where Brady sees someone like Mendoza and sees a little bit of a reflection of his own experience.
I agree more. I definitely think Brady sees a lot of himself mentally in Mendoza. The question is, can he get there, the NFL career-wise, which is the 5 a.m. to midnight type of days, right? And, like, that's why I think Mendoza is so perfect for the Raiders. Is he seems like he's that kind of guy. That, like Tebow, Tebow's going to outwork everyone. Tebow just didn't have the skill. Mendoza has the skill. He's got the arm, the throwing motion. He's got the footwork. To me, especially when I talk to scouts, the question is always going to be the number one pick. The pressure is just so insane. The expectations are so insane. I talk to Chad all the time. The number one pick thing is so tough because it just doesn't work out. And the expectations are so tough that, like, Stafford is honestly the only number one pick that's really worked out in the last 15 years. Like, you can go through all these number one picks not only does it matter so much about the team around these guys, it matters the organization, right? A lot of these number one picks are going to bad organizations. And, as much as we want to say how great Tom Brady is coming in there trying to change the culture of the Raiders, there's so much work to do. Mike Mayock, Gruden, they sent the Raiders back to the Stone Age. Like it's taken them so many drafts now to catch up to it. And I look at Mendoza, love the talent, very excited for him. I try to explain to people though, you need to bring back expectations. If he can reach Matt Ryan, which I compare a lot to him, a lot of his game reminds me of Matt Ryan. To me, that would be successful. An MVP season, reaching a Super Bowl with the Raiders, that would be incredible. To other people, that would be a bust, which again, it's just, I would love to get your angle on this. Like, where do you see Mendoza's career projecting? What kind of envision do you have for him? Is he the type of guy where I can't see it, but could you see him being out of the league in 8 years, right? That his body doesn't hold up, right? That he put too much stress on his body, that he, as big as a frame as he has, and as much as he carries that weight, can he keep adding to that? Because when I look at this class, he's the only guy to me worthy of the number one first round pick, right? Like Ty Simpson, that kid's body to me just will not hold up in this league. Like he's built lesser than Brock Purdy. And we've seen Brock Purdy, as good as Brock Purdy is, he's not held up. Mendoza's got the body. Mendoza's got the big, broad shoulders. He's, like you said, he's 6'4", 6'5". He is exactly what these scouts are looking for. Like, do you agree with me there? Is he more likely to be a bust, or do you think the way you project out for him, can he be a solidified 15-year, 10-year starter in this league?
I mean, I like his chances of being a really good quarterback. You know what I mean? And I think that, like, he's going to enter into a situation that has some benefits. Look at, like, him and Caleb Williams. All right. I mean, Caleb's going to the Bears. Sorry, Chad. And, he's playing for an organization that had a horrible track record for developing quarterbacks, and a defensive coach and an offensive coordinator who hadn't really developed a quarterback on his own, where, he's going to have the infrastructure of access to Tom Brady's mind. He's going to have an offensive coordinator a head coach who spent his life on the offensive side of the ball and is coming off a Super Bowl win when they did, miraculous work with, a quarterback that I think a lot of people didn't think had that upside. And I think that, like, you're absolutely right. I mean, context matters. And, I think that he's going to a team that knows, that a coaching staff that'll know how to protect him a little bit. And I don't mean just from, like, a pocket standpoint, but how to, like, keep the pressures both in game and out of game at bay as best we can. And I think that he is well equipped for it. I will say that he's a little older. He had to play his best in huge games this year where there was a ton of pressure on them. And even though we could say they were playing with house money, they're Indiana. I mean, that's not how they think. And he came through, you know what I mean? And so I think that, like, all of those things I look at as tremendous upside. At the same sense, you look at someone like Nussmeier, who I loved. I thought, for as much hype as Manning got entering last year, I thought he was that Nussmeier was the best quarterback in the SEC, and frankly, it wasn't close. Like I think that, like, you look at him, he'll probably be the third or fourth quarterback picked. Had a tough senior year due to injury, which happens, but he has a ton of great football under his belt against the highest competition. And I think that if he goes to a team like Pittsburgh, where he can maybe learn under Aaron Rodgers for a year, like, that could lead him to being to possibly being the best quarterback in the draft. I mean, that's the thing that makes this stuff so fun and also hard to project, is that, like, we grade draft picks and players individually, but context matters for everything for them. And, you look 2 years ago, people would say right now, Caleb Williams clearly has the most upside of any quarterback in the class of 24. And he's earned that. But I mean, Bo Nix's statistics are so much better than anybody else's in every way, including wins. And, it's because he went to a good team with an offensive-minded head coach from the start who knows what a successful program looks like, and Caleb didn't. And so I think that like those are the types of comps that I think are really fascinating, and it'll take a couple years to see how they shake out.
Well, I'm glad you bring up Bo Nix because you had that great section in the book and all that good reporting from Sean Payton about how he looked at quarterbacks. And he had told you before the draft that he was taking Bo Nix. That was the guy that he wanted and he had sort of identified. Explain, because this was awesome, explain how Sean Payton was looking and scouting quarterbacks and what mattered most to him, and then see if you can extrapolate from that and identify quarterbacks.
We'd have to call up AI and run their numbers through everything. But he basically, so this is when he was with the Saints. And I've been rambling, so I'll be as brief as I can. Cut me off if I'm rambling too long. But when he was with the Saints.
Seth, you're our guest. You can speak for as long as you want.
All right. When he was with the Saints, he was looking to replace Drew Brees, and he liked Patrick Mahomes a lot. The problem with college quarterbacks nowadays is that you have these offenses that really came around in the Hal Mummy, Mike Leach, turn of the century, early aughts, that knew how to exploit space with incredibly simple concepts, but are very difficult to defend. And they take quarterbacks who really are average quarterbacks and produce superstars out of them. And so like with college, you can't trust statistics coming out of college anymore because so many guys have incredible stats. I think that the guy who owns the record for touchdown passes at the highest level in college in a single season is Bailey Zappi, who's barely been able to hang on in the NFL. And so if you can't trust statistics and you really can't trust your eyes because the spacing is so different in college than in the NFL, then what can you trust? And he wanted to try to figure out a way to quantify processing speed, which of course is like the holy grail of quarterback evaluation. And so he developed this analytics formula that was kind of like a failure index where he looked at total attempts and then looked at sacks taken, fumbles, interceptions per pass attempt, things like that. Because he was basically like, look, if they take a lot of sacks, and Payton considers sacks a quarterback statistic, not an offensive line statistic, and if they're fumbling a lot, and if they have a high rate of interceptions, it probably means that they're not seeing the action very fast, and you're not going to improve that in the NFL. So that was the first year that he did it. It led him to really love Patrick Mahomes' numbers. Like Patrick Mahomes scored the best out of that 2017 draft. As we all know, he was going to draft Patrick. Andy Reid swooped up, traded with Buffalo, the pick before the Saints, got Mahomes, changed his career. And so when Payton got to Denver, he knew he was going to pick a quarterback. They were going to cut bait with Russell Wilson and eat the cap number, and they were going to pick a quarterback. And he ran everyone through it, including Chad's boy, Caleb Williams. And Bo Nix, by far the best averages out of that. And so what he saw with Bo was a guy who had played in bad weather at Oregon and barely fumbled, a guy who had completed a high percentage of his passes, a guy who, just didn't turn the ball over a lot and didn't make a lot of mistakes. His sack numbers were so small. And so that was helped him buy into Bo Nix, and then everything Bo Nix showed him from there on out kind of solidified it. So that was the gist of it. Caleb Williams didn't have great numbers coming out of there. Drake May didn't have great numbers coming out of there. I think JJ McCarthy did, if I remember right. But it just shows that like maybe this isn't a silver bullet formula, but Sean believed in it, and it's one expert's opinion about how to try to figure out a way to measure, what's the hardest thing to judge coming out of college, which is like, can these guys see the game quickly and decisively?
Well, who's got great processing speed?
Me.
Well, I was going to say Fernando Mendoza. Also, Seth Wickersham. Simon, what are you going to say?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that's my favorite part about this quarterback position is, especially someone like me, I'm talking to NFL people constantly. Everyone thinks they have the secret formula, but there really isn't one. And that's what I love so much about it, because we all have blind spots in life. Everybody has blind spots. If you don't think you do, that's a blind spot. And, I always think back to that Wentz Jared Goff draft where Dak Prescott ended up being the best quarterback. And, you can say Dak dropped because of the DUI and the other stuff going on in college. There's more to it, right? There's always more to it. It's how did he interview? There's all little stupid things like that. And, Chad knows I am one of the biggest Jalen Hurts defenders. I don't even try to defend him anymore because it's either you believe in Jalen Hurts, you get it, or you don't. And I always love going back to his draft class because he was the forgotten man, right? You had you had these guys going up top, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. I know we don't believe it now, but Tua was supposed to be the guy in that draft class. He was supposed to be number 1 until Joe Burrow took over that. Jordan Love went ahead of Hurts. And to me, what these teams missed, which I think how he nailed was every step in Hurts' life, he dealt with adversity. And that's what, again, I go back to Mendoza. I love these guys who go through adversity. Bo Nix went through a ton of adversity. That him getting hurt in that game, which I would love to talk to you about, that to me is as horrible as that was for Bo to go through. That's an amazing motivator for him going further because he was so close at AFC Championship game and it was taken away from him because of a stupid little injury. And, Jalen Hurts, we're into year 5 now, and you still people in media doubting him, which, again, I get it. It's all part of it. But, I keep giving out the numbers. In 5 years as a starter, he's number 1 in winning percentage. He's 5th in total yards. He's 3rd in total TDs. And he's 10th in QBR. So it's like when I'm evaluating these quarterbacks now, I try to always bring that in where I missed that with Hurts. I looked at Hurts' arm talent, and I was like, this guy will never be a starter consistently in this league. He just is so inconsistent. What happened is he got to the league. Obviously, he worked on that. He worked on his arm, but he found a system that worked for him, right? They found a way to use his legs. So when I look at Mendoza, I really do think, as much as I do have doubts about him, we've seen him be able to use his legs. We've seen him use his body in a way in college. I would love to get your perspective on that. Do you think his game from college can transition to NFL, or do you think they're going to tear down everything Cignetti did with him and kind of rebuild up?
There's a lot in there. Number one, how when you were broken, how did you respond? I think that that's such a critical factor. Brady is the face that we'll always think of in terms of how someone can respond to that situation. With Mendoza, there's 2 routes to win in the NFL. You have your established franchise quarterback. He's your guy. You're committed to him. He's making a ton of money and, he's the face of the franchise. And then you have the other way, which is you're not sure, but you draft these guys that are on a rookie contract. You can put a ton of great surrounding talent around them. And, it's a relatively inexpensive investment as you're trying to figure out whether this will work out. I mean, when Chad and I were working together at ESPN, the first quarterbacks picked in the draft were getting these huge contracts, much bigger than Tom Brady was getting. Alex Smith was making so much more money than Tom Brady was making, and Tom had 3 rings because, there was no rookie wage cap. And these agents like Tom Condon and Jimmy Sexton would just hold up teams. And, it ended up being a blessing for those guys financially, but I think a complete curse in every single way. And I think that's one of the reasons why so few of those guys, maybe only Stafford, truly became universally considered great, was because they're going to bad teams. They're getting paid a ton of money, so there's fewer good players to surround them with. The coaches are under more pressure than ever to make it work with them. There's all these cultural problems within the locker room because you have guys who have established themselves who aren't making as much as he is. And all of those things colluded against a lot of these guys being successful. And I think that the other route is the, Hurts a little bit route, the Russell Wilson route with Seattle, the route that the 49ers tried to take with Brock Purdy, where, they clearly got to the overtime of a Super Bowl win. The Broncos are doing with Bo Nix, Patriots with Drake May, where it's you basically take a guy, you hope he works out, but if you have to cut your losses, it doesn't screw up your franchise for the entire time. And so that's what they're going to do. Like Brady has said that, you know, we were in his living room once and, you know, we were talking about the early part of his career. And he's like, yeah, we were a defensive team and I just kind of managed the game. And I was like, dude, I don't think so. I mean, he led the league in touchdown passes his second year, which I pointed out to him. And he was like, it wasn't that many though. And, you know, he won Super Bowls, especially the second Super Bowl, you know, by throwing the ball 40 some times. I mean, that's not a game manager, but I think what he was trying to say, and he's kind of said this since then, is that he didn't think he was consistently excellent for a long time. And he didn't think till 2004 he was consistently excellent. So that's 01, 02, 03, 2 Super Bowls in 3 years before he thought he was consistently excellent. And so I think that like the model for bringing Mendoza into the league is the same type of thing where it's like you're managing someone. So that means, yeah, you're going to run RPOs and things, you know, speak the language that he's used to. But it's also the NFL, and you have to figure out a way to stay ahead of defenses and give him a chance to, you know, run legit NFL offenses. And I think that, like, in that regard, he's coming into a good situation. I mean, Kubiak, you know, that system, they know how to run, they know how to coach offense. And, you know, that can't be said for everybody.
Let's do a quick break, hear from our friends at Hard Rock, then we'll come right back. Today's show is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet, Florida's sports book. Spring is in the air, and that can only mean one thing. Baseball is back in full swing. Hard Rock Bet makes it easy to bet on America's pastime in just a few easy taps. And it's not just picking winners. Bet on home runs, strikeouts, and so much more. And if you miss the first pitch, no problem. You can live bet every inning, every at-bat, all the way to the final out. But maybe you're more into the NBA. The hardwood is heating up as the playoff push is on. And with Hard Rock Bet, every night is a shot to build a same-game parlay and score a major bucket. However you draw it up, Hard Rock Bet gives you tons of ways to stack your picks into an epic same-game parlay. Sign up today and double your winnings on your first 10 bets, maximum $50. That's right, double your winnings on your first 10 bets. So if you would have won $100 on your bet, now it's $200. Download the Hard Rock Bet app today and get the party started. You know, Seti, you bring up an interesting point about Brady, and you did this in the Patriots book, It's Better to Be Feared, which was laid out Brady's path to the NFL. And everyone always acts like he was Kurt Warner coming from nowhere and being a 6th round pick. And they show the picture of him at the combine when he's got a scrawny body. But the guy was also a supreme athlete who was drafted to play Major League Baseball, who was heavily recruited out of high school. It's not like he was some guy who got plucked from obscurity and went to Michigan. He was recruited by USC. He was recruited by other big schools. You don't get to Michigan because you're not a superior athlete who shows a lot of potential. The idea that Brady came out of nowhere and was sort of an inferior athlete, I think has become such a part of his myth making. It deserves a little bit of myth busting.
Yeah, I mean, he was always, first of all, if you watch his film in Michigan or even in high school, I mean, the guy just, he could throw. He was a phenomenal, what they call arm talent. And I think that the problem was that it came out of what was a gangly body, and he had horrible foot speed. I think we could just say that, you know what I mean? And even though he could have played pro baseball, he wasn't Ricky Henderson. And so I think that, like, you combine all of those things with the fact of his situation at Michigan where, you know, the coaches, at least the head coach, you know, wasn't sure he really wanted him to be the starting quarterback. And that was kind of the thing that dogged him. And I think that, like, we're smarter about, even though we're not perfect, we're so much smarter about evaluating quarterbacks now than we were back then. And it was partly because of him. and his success. And there was a lot of guys in that time. Like there was Kurt Warner first, then Brady, then like Jake Delhomme. There's all these guys who kind of like came out of nowhere who were really coming in and playing well in the league. Whereas like, if you look at it really since like, I want to say that Eli Manning, Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers draft, just about every good quarterback ends up being a first round pick. I mean, there's people like Brock Purdy, who are outliers, but just about all of them are first round picks. And, but yeah, when you look back at Brady, I think that like, we want to think that, nobody had ever heard of the guy when he was playing at Michigan in front of 100-something thousand people, beating Ohio State and, winning a lot of big games in the Big Ten.
I mean, he was throwing for 350 yards in bowl games. It's not like he was a scrub. We had on one of the co-hosts for Fantasy Pros, which is a big podcast, named Derek Brown, who loves to scout the draft. And we were having a long conversation about Ty Simpson. And obviously, Ty Simpson's name has gotten a lot of attention the past few weeks because Dan Orlovsky has been saying that he thinks he could be the number one pick. Whatever. It's absurd.
Yeah.
But when you look at Ty Simpson, how much do you think the way he's being scouted is, as Derek would say, they're scouting the helmet versus scouting the guy?
Yeah. How do you separate player from system? And I think that we talk about system quarterbacks with kind of, it's a backhanded compliment, right? I mean, we think of like Chad Pennington, you know what I mean? This guy who would lead the league in arc. And, everyone's like, oh, that's the perfect system quarterback who just does smart things with the ball, but he's not Caleb Williams, making these crazy throws. And like, every quarterback is a system quarterback. Like there's some of them like Caleb who can do things outside of the system that are really special, but Caleb Williams is a system quarterback because look at him his first year and look at him his second year. I mean, the statistics and the presence are just night and day. If Joe Montana had not been drafted by a brilliant coach who happened to have come up with a system that was perfectly well suited for Joe Montana's skills, I don't know if we're ever really talking about him. So like, how do you separate them? I don't quite know. I think that the biggest thing that I see with Simpson that worries me is just the height. I just think that like, if I was at a Super Bowl party and I'm like 6'1", I was at a Super Bowl party and I look over and there's this guy next to me and it's Myles Garrett. And I was like, oh my God, like, how do you ever throw over that guy? Like, if you're a quarterback, how do you ever do it? Because he was so tall and he didn't even have his arms up. And I was like, how would you ever, if you're Brock Purdy, how do you ever get the ball over this guy? And so I think that like height ends up being one of the measurables that I think matters quite a bit. And, I think that if you're 6'1", you're really hoping that you go to a perfect system like Brock Purdy did with Kyle Shanahan, where they figure out ways to open up windows for you to see the field, because that's going to be really tough. And in college, it's just easier. And like height matters so much less in college because you can, first of all, the defensive linemen are all aren't 6'4" and above, but you can figure out ways, again, to create space both within the passing game in the secondary and blocking in the pocket to make things a lot, as they say, like a clearer picture for the quarterback. So that's what I worry about with him.
I have two let's make a list questions for you. The first one is about systems and coaches. And over the past couple of years, especially this year after Sam Darnold won the Super Bowl, all of this conversation about Kevin O'Connell and what he had done for Kirk Cousins, what he had done for Sam Darnold, what he had done for Daniel Jones, what didn't happen with J.J. McCarthy, what could happen with Kyler Murray. If you were to rank quarterback whisperers right now in the NFL, whose system is most friendly to quarterbacks. And there's so many guys. It could be Shanahan, McVay, O'Connell, now Kubiak. How would you order? And I don't want your order. I want your order based on your sources telling you who they think is the best quarterback whisperer in the NFL right now. Who are people in awe? Could be Sean Payton.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'd probably go with the older guys, which would say Reed, Payton. I mean, it's funny, but McVay and Shanahan are kind of older guys now.
Yeah, right.
Even though they seem young. Kyle's got more gray than both you and me, Chad. So, they would go with them, and I think O'Connell would be up there too. That's the sense that I get. I mean, I think that we have a recency bias in the NFL, and in sports in general. I mean, we love to see who did what most recently and sort of crown them when, people like Andy Reid and Sean Payton have done it for decades now. I would push back a little bit, this idea that Dak is automatically the best quarterback out of that draft because, I think that what McVay was able to do with Goff and what Goff was able to do in LA and has done since then, I think are pretty impressive things. I mean, it's a good debate regardless, but that's what I would say.
Well, this is my question for you and Simon. Simon, you go first. And there's a very specific reason I'm asking this. You can have one quarterback next year to win a Super Bowl. So it's taking out age as a factor, right? Because you just want the best player, the best quarterback who can win you a Super Bowl next year. Who is that quarterback? Simon, you go first.
Mahomes. Every time it's Mahomes. I don't even care if he's playing on one leg next year. It's still who is the guy when the other team looks across the sideline in January and they blow it and the other guy doesn't. Mahomes he's the cheat code. And I won't get too much into it, but what Seth talked about a little bit is a lot of scouts I know, Chad, if you're left-handed or if you're under 6'1", you are off their draft board. They won't even waste a second. And you'll be like, well, aren't they going to miss the diamond in the rough? Sure, but that is the rarest of diamonds. I mean, it's just the left-handed quarterback thing is a real thing. Like Penix, I know that was your guy, Chad. People did not have him on their draft.
By the way, everyone on this show is my guy. Caleb, Mendoza, Penix, all of it true, by the way. I freaking loved Penix at Indiana. Loved him.
So, yeah, that's, again, for me, if it ain't broke, I ain't going to try to fix it. Mahomes, if you're a believer in Mahomes and betting future markets, this is as low as he's been since his rookie year. It's just, he's not being talked about. Look at us going on and on about Mendoza in the toughest division in all of football. So, yeah, I'm interested to hear where Seth goes with this, but I'm still heavily biased towards Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to ever bet against 15 because he's done it more times than the other guys have even had a chance to do it, right? I mean, he's been down in Super Bowls and come through. And you watch Josh Allen and you're just like, you think you've never seen a player like him. I mean, it's like if Michael Vick had lived up to everything he could have been and is better, that's Josh Allen. Chad knows this, and this will be out, soon. But I spent the entire playoff run with the Denver Broncos, so I had all access, and I was in every meeting, every decision, every game planning session, all of this stuff, and I just wanted to witness what the playoffs were like from the inside. And part of what they need to do as coaches is figure out ways to be honest in their assessment of their own team and the opponent. And so when you're about to play Josh Allen, as they did in the first round, I mean, what do you do? What do you say about Josh Allen other than the guy is by far the best player in the NFL right now, and we have to hope. You know what I mean? So you have to, number one, make sure that the players understand how good he is. But number two, figure out ways to give rooted and factual insight into him that give them confidence that they can do something productive against him. And one of the things that came up with Josh Allen. I have to go back and look at this, but like it was like something like 87 out of his career 90 something interceptions that weren't like Hail Mary interceptions were thrown from the pocket. And so that said, like, look, if you keep this guy in the pocket, odds are he'll give you one. And if you let him scramble and he has a clear read of the field and nobody around him, you're probably going to get chewed up pretty good. And he threw 2 interceptions in that playoff game against Denver, and they were both from the pocket. And so, you know, I don't know if a statistic like that exists for Patrick Mahomes, which is why I think you have to like go with him, as great as Josh Allen is. But it's just kind of interesting how we look at these guys, how they're perceived, and then, you know, the ways that you might be able to increase the odds of being successful against them.
Well, you saw the biggest change with Mahomes was the too high safety, right? It was, okay, Mahomes got the best arm in the league. Let's make him beat us 5 yards at a time, which he could do when he had a 30-year-old Travis Kelce, had Tyreek Hill. Now that they've missed on these receivers and Kelce's aged out, you see it in those games of Mahomes. Every those 3, 4, 5 yards, it's a grind because he just doesn't have the weapons like he used to. So that's the coolest thing, too, for me is the NFL always adjusts to these incredible talents. And you see it's like, okay, you are the best ever at these deep balls. We're going to take that away. And now when you see Mahomes throw deep balls, people question, like, oh, Mahomes isn't even that good at throwing deep passes anymore. It's like, yeah, because he only gets to do it maybe once every 3 games. It's just the teams have totally taken it away. And that's, like you just said, the Josh Allen part, it felt like he had no weakness. And you've highlighted what teams are really attacked with is they don't rush those edges, right? They keep them hovering. They just kind of keep him in the pocket. It's like, okay, he's going to burn us. It is Josh Allen. But you've seen how teams have really taken that step back of he doesn't have a number 1 receiver, Josh Allen. Let's make him beat us with his arm. Like, okay, is he going to hit Kincaid for 15 yards up the middle? Yes. But we'll take that away next play and make him force him outside to his number 1 receiver. So like I said, I love the chess match of football. And people get on me all the time about it. You've never seen a higher level right now. Defenses, it's never been harder. Even Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback ever, talks about how he wishes he could come back because he sees so many little weaknesses in these defenses because he says it's the same defenses they were running in the early 2000s. And these guys, young guys, aren't used to it. But he's like, I've seen this. That's why you saw Stafford do so well. Because Stafford saw these defenses in 2008, 2009. So I love that stuff. Just bringing back old school stuff with new age players. It's one of my favorite parts to watch. I don't know about you, Seth, if you catch that stuff, but I am intrigued by that.
It was always like what Belichick would do in big games when facing great passers is he would give them the run and dare them. Like with Peyton Manning, he had a defense where he had no interior defensive tackles. And so this was in a playoff game. He was giving Peyton Manning the run up the middle, letting him call run up the middle, up the gap, betting that a player as gifted as Peyton Manning would get bored calling that play and eventually would just say, like, I just can't take it anymore, even though he's giving it to them. And when he would change out of that, he'd go right into a trap. And I think that, like, you see that was what his game plan with, you know, the Bills in the 1990 Super Bowl, the Rams in the 2001 Super Bowl, facing Peyton. You know, he would give away the run, betting that their egos wouldn't let them take it, beat the hell out of the wide receivers. He was fearless about playing man-to-man defense. And then, again, just play safe defense and make them dink and dunk down the field, thinking that they just don't have the patience for it. And then they'll either the odds or the patience to do it. And that was the thing that teams always tried to do with Brady, especially at the end of his career, not knowing that was Brady's, that he loved doing that. Like, he loved taking the check down. If you look at a lot of the Patriots Super Bowls, their running backs often were the leading receivers in those games because he would love nothing more than to drop the ball off to, you know, J.R. Redmond and to pull like a deep cut there and, you know, get them the ball in space and just keep moving the chains. And as Brady got older, teams started to give him that, thinking that that was the best way to defense him, when in fact the teams that defensed him well were the ones that dared him to throw deep and took away the inside stuff. And I thought that that was kind of an interesting chess match that you talk about, and it kind of speaks to like who Brady was and how he was coached, that the best way of shutting down the greatest quarterback ever was to actually force him to make the most highlight-worthy throws.
You know, Seth, it's been a minute since the Broncos season ended. You might want to get that story in before next season starts.
I'm trying.
When you were there, since you opened the door, and don't give away too much.
It's a lot of shit to go through, Chad. It's a lot of stuff.
I get it. I mean, I've practically written a book in the time since that season ended and that story is coming out.
Me too.
Obviously, everything with that season changed in one of those last plays of the game with Bo Nix. And it changed it, like, pull back the curtain a little bit on what it's like in that locker room, in that moment, when all of a sudden it could have been a play call that Sean Payton regretted. It could have been a moment he didn't even realize was going to be significant. When you're there and all of a sudden they realize, oh, fuck, we just won this game and we won the battle and we lost the war, basically.
Absolutely. I mean, I was there when Sean found out, and I'll refrain from giving too many details because it was a pretty interesting moment to witness. But I mean, just imagine, you spend all year with one goal. And, Sean was saying in training camp, we're a Super Bowl team. This team has and everybody was like, dude, whatever, man. And then everything during the season comes up Denver, right? Chiefs and Mahomes have an off year and then he gets hurt. The Chargers which were the team that Sean wanted to face the least in the playoffs because they matched up well against Denver, get bounced, by the Patriots. Patriots, beatable. Let's just put it that way. You know what I mean? There was nothing. Nobody was looking at the Patriots saying like, how are we ever going to beat these guys? Joe Burrow misses the playoffs. Lamar Jackson misses the playoffs. All of these things came up right for Denver. They end up with, the top seed in the AFC and the bye. And they go and face the game's best player and beat him in overtime. And, within 20 minutes of that, you go from thinking, oh my God, everything is coming as I saw it happening, to unless we pull off something that hasn't happened since 1972, our season's over. Like, that was a startling moment to witness. And it was you guys know as reporters, I mean, it's like you hardly ever witness moments that are truly pure and honest and revealing. And I will always remember that meeting when Sean was told that Bo Nix was out and watching how he handled it in that moment. Because, I mean, again, you go from thinking like, if Bo Nix is available, they win that game.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
And, those opportunities where everything comes up Denver happen once, for your team, happen once every like 5 years, if you're lucky. And that was how hard it was.
That's what it makes everything about winning a title feel that much more miraculous. In one of the people that I'm talking to for my book that I've, made a lot of progress on, when they were in college, they're so smart and they got into the sports and analytics community, and they spent consecutive summers, one working for the Browns in college and one working for the Eagles in college. And they love football. They love being in the space, but they decided they didn't want to go work for a team because they were never going to get full control over play calling. And they felt like if they were in the front office just doing the analysis, even if they were GM, there's so much stuff that is so out of your control because of injuries and bad calls and bad fumbles and bad bounces that your entire career you can miss out on winning the ultimate prize based on things that you cannot dictate. And it's so frustrating. And that is something that happened to the Broncos this year. And it actually, when that moment happens, you just feel for everybody because you know that it's all they're going to be thinking about. It's going to be 12 months of every single day thinking about that moment.
And, to tie it full circle, I mean, like, we cannot know what happens on the field, and you can't accurately reflect judge quarterback play unless you know what the intent of the play is, because the human error factor comes in so much more than anybody realizes. Like, you have some receivers who aren't good at catching certain routes. So, you don't think about that. You know what I mean? That maybe a receiver catches the fade better than they catch the square in. And so if they have a square in called, or if the defense knows that and they're going to force them to run a square in and take away the fade, you have to account for other things. You have offensive linemen who, like Denver's all-pro guard, was great all year, had a horrible game against the Patriots. Like, of all the things the Broncos factored in trying to, how do we win with a backup quarterback in the AFC Championship game, having their all-pro guard get his butt beat against the Patriots wasn't one of them. You have matchups. You have all of these things that come into play. And so when you look at a quarterback and you say, oh, his completion percentage isn't very good, he must be inaccurate. Like, there's so many factors that go into just completion percentage that make it a difficult statistic to judge. Like, maybe it's not. Maybe Aaron Rodgers is the most accurate passer ever, and it's obvious because the guy could always put the ball wherever he wanted. But you're talking about a superhuman level of quarterbacking, and when we're trying to evaluate college quarterbacks, again, it's so hard to trust statistics because statistics lie, especially in the college game.
Well, Seth, listen, I'm sure it's going to be a perfectly timed, great summer read. That Broncos story. Listen, Seth, everyone should go pre-order Beyond That Hill, because all the stories that are in there, I know I've read, and I know they're brilliant, and we got to keep our streak alive of having books and authors that become bestsellers on the most literate sports betting podcast. But if you're not going to order Beyond That Hill, at least go buy American Kings. Available now. Everywhere books are sold. Seth Wickersham, great stuff, buddy. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Thanks for being such an expert on quarterbacks.
Great to see you guys.
This has been Sharper Square, part of the Volume Podcast Network. Watch or listen on YouTube at Sharper Square. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Download us from Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe, leave us 5 stars. Say whatever you want. Feedback is a gift. Till next time, love you.
This is actual comments made by Scouts Draft Profile Aaron Rodgers.
Gets sacked a lot, doesn't have ability to change the release of the football, can't create on his own.
Ouch.
Panics under pressure, gets flustered easily.